relationship between New York and Cabin John is really unexpected. Until we moved here, I never really lived in the United States outside a city. I was born in New York. I grew up in New York. I went to school in New York. My images of the city are of neighborhoods, of being fascinated by just walking down the streets in New York and just watching the different faces that are there. I lived across the street from a park, Claremont Park. But Claremont Park was, even then, a place where gangs used to meet and where they used to hide guns and have gang wars and things like that. I used to see that park not so much as a park, but as a place where there was a whole undercurrent. I mean, I'd go out in the park, and in the afternoon there were kids playing in the playgrounds, but I knew at night that that park was a war zone. Nobody went into that park at night because the gangs had different territories in them and just didn't do that. And so my idea of what landscape was always had those two elements in it. That there was the element of the traditional expected beauty, and then something that would happen in that same place that would be very dramatic, filled with adventure, questionable some of the time, and the park would survive it. So when I came out here, there was all of this grand nature. The big change was the change in the spaces and seeing the trees. I mean, these trees are so close in, and out here, there's a real transformation over the seasons. The summer is like a tree house and things close in and the shapes are really small and the light is very flickery and unsure. And then in the winter, there are big, bright, open, clearly defined shapes. I've always broken the forms up into their pieces. I think painting by the numbers must have had an enormous effect on me when I was really young, because I was amazed at how they could take that apart, and then when I saw people do them, they would put in these colors all over the place, and then when they were finished, it would turn into something. I thought that was a wonderful thing to be able to do. And I love to watch people putting jigsaw puzzles together. I was thinking about how I see. And since I wear glasses, I'm nearsighted and I have an astigmatism. And so in some ways I have a choice of vision. Either I could see, I suppose, with corrected vision, the way a lot of people see, but if I took off my glasses, I clearly had a unique point of view. There was nobody else that could see the way I saw. When I stare at something for some time, the image itself begins to move slightly. It develops a little flicker, so that at first there's an image that looks one way, and then if I look at it long enough, it moves. So that there's almost a natural overlapping of the layers that I see if I stare long enough. I don't like to do that constantly or too much, because it's not helpful in really focusing. I'm just moving the image back and forth a little. But it's kind of nice to be able to change the focus on something by looking at it longer. And the more I did that, the more I liked it. It's most effective in landscape, where the light is changing normally all the time. So that as I see that, the light changes and the shapes change. While they're very, very defined, suddenly they have a slightly different definition. The process evolved over a period of years. I've always worked in series. There was an animal series early. The blanket series was probably the longest of them. And that kept reoccurring because it turned out that blanket and landscape had a lot in common with the nude. So I started by dividing up the spaces. I moved from landscape to the animals, which kept the white spaces between them. When I did the blanket series, there were white spaces within the blanket and the figure, and then there was a white space around it. In other words, I started to mix the media. There was the blank canvas. Some of the figure was done in charcoal and then in oil. Then I started to add sumi brush on. I did large sumi brush works. Again, the white space was then not between the shapes, but it started to be in the negative space around the larger ones. I kept the white spaces there, and then they turned into dark lines. I decided that I needed something which would come off the canvas. And I didn't want to work just in heavy impasto, because those lines between the spaces for me were a very important way for finding my way around the painting. But then I decided, if I find my way around the painting, that it is in fact a road of some sort. If not a maze, then a road, or several roads, or a map, or a place through the landscape or the figure. And so I started searching for a material that would allow that to happen, but not be predictable or obvious. So I started out first with just a painted black line, but that wasn't very good. That just made, it cut up the canvas too much. And then, oddly enough, I suppose, when you come back to what it is, there I was walking through pearl paint, and there was this stuff. It started this, what is that, puff paint. I said, look at that stuff. It just stands up right off the shirt. Well, if it stands up off the shirt, it's going to stand up off the canvas. So I bought some of it, and I started to use it. And it was all right, but I didn't have the flexibility with it. So I had to start mixing my own relief lines. So I used acrylic paint and a gel, which I mixed, and tried to reload back into the old bottles, or else I would try and find, I would use my veterinarian's old large hypodermic needles to get the line that I wanted, because I wanted a thin line. I wanted a line that when the light hit it would be there at certain times and not at others. This goes back into what you see and what you don't see. But I wanted it to come off the canvas. I wanted it to be, I guess I was almost like a tightrope that you would walk around the shapes, that if you were in the painting, you could look down and you would see where you were. So I projected and drew and added the color system And then I would take the canvas down off of the easel because I can't put the three-dimensional material on while it's on the easel because it drips off, and I put it on a flat surface. And when I put it on a flat surface and I start doing the lines, for me, at that point, the representational painting becomes abstract because I am into the lines. I am the one walking on the canvas making the lines, and since I pay such close attention to where that line is going, I am in an abstract place. On the canvases, from the time I started painting, there have always been, I suppose, they're secret images. There's a dog over here facing that way, and then there's a deer over here. There are sometimes animal forms, sometimes there are faces and tree forms. And I started to put those in, and this also has to do with my astigmatism. And it has to do with a bathroom floor in a Peace Corps volunteers' house in Nigeria. There were cracks on the floor. And I would stare at the floor, and lots of people do this, and suddenly the cracks in the floor would begin to take on all these images and shapes, and then they would start moving as I stared at them because of what's, and I thought, look at this, I'm creating a whole dance apparatus on the floor. Well, I took those ideas, and sometimes when I'm working with the lines, I will simply include them. So there's another level of imagery in there, which is sort of in passing and is interesting to me to have in there. Some people see it and some people don't. But I like that because it allows people who see the painting to begin to also transform the images. There are several paintings in this. There's the line painting that questions the place of where you are. If it's just the black lines on white, they're unsure sometimes. And then I will add color area. Sometimes I will re-add the relief lines after the color area is on if I'm not happy about where it is. Sometimes I'll paint right over and I won't put them back. And that's when I add more of the place with the color. So there's an abstract place that appears with the line, and then there's more representational place that comes up with the color. while the landscapes have their element of classic or traditional beauty, there's also an underlying tension in them, and sometimes it turns out to be an odd object that's in there which is not traditionally beautiful, or something that causes tension in what you might have as a